We did not aim to become big. Our aim was not around growth. We wanted to create a business that would allow us to be working mothers, to look after clients well, and run a business according to our values. And we didn't really have any huge thoughts around growth. However, that has obviously changed as time's gone on.
Hi, I'm Belden Menkus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Emma Gaudern, co-founder and managing director of EMG Solicitors. The firm is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year in style, having been picked as one of the Times 100 best places to work and being certified as a B Corporation. EMG Solicitors describes itself as people-powered and purpose-driven and says its mission is providing the legal support our clients require to achieve anything from their basic needs to their wildest dreams and everything in between. Since its founding in 2014, EMG has grown from 4 people to 180 across 5 offices. Emma, welcome to the Purposeful Strategist podcast.
Thank you, Belden.
Great to have you here.
Thank you. Looking forward to chatting.
Good. Let's just go straight into it then. On your website, you say you're purpose-driven and you have a mission, and you also have a statement about why that says, we believe in equality. We will fight for our clients all day long, though our passion is not limited to providing exemplary legal services, but also in making a meaningful contribution to our community and charitable causes we support. In your thinking, are these all essentially the same thing, and are any of them EMG's purpose?
So first of all, I think they're not the same thing, but I think they're linked.
Okay.
For me, it's about kind of trying to understand who you are and where you're going. I think it really helps us clarify that. I think it's really important when you decide to set up and run a business to work out who you are and why you're doing it. And that isn't just about making money, because if it is, the fun of that won't last for very long necessarily. So I love the fact that I have on my LinkedIn bio that I aim to create joyful employment. I think we've all been in jobs where we haven't really been that bothered and we haven't wanted to go to work. And I think if you can have a job that people enjoy coming to, that they like to work with you and that they want to get up and get on with their job, then that's really important. So I think it's important to look after your people. That way you look after your clients well. You know, the two things are absolutely linked together because you don't often get unhappy people doing a great service for clients. And I think it's really important to give back to your community. Your clients come from your local community, your team comes from its community, and there are people out there that need a bit of help, aren't there? And it's nice to provide that.
Sure. How did you come to these different statements? What was the process and who got involved? And was it once and done, or have they evolved over time?
It's definitely evolved over time. I've realized probably quite late on in life that I do my best thinking when I'm walking. We've got 2 dogs. Mm-hmm. So when we first started out, we felt that we needed, some kind of strap line to try and set out who we are and what we do. So on a dog walk, I was giving that some thought, and I came up with supporting clients, protecting assets, changing lives, which links really closely into the fact that we work with people who've had a life-changing brain injury. So we act as deputies for them, which means that we manage their money and make sure it lasts a lifetime and so on. That's about half of the firm does. And those clients absolutely need our support. I mean, all clients do, but those people in particular, they're a very vulnerable group of people in society, which is why we came up with the first bit, supporting clients. And then because of that work that we do as deputies, we have to look after people's assets. So therefore, that's how the protecting assets bit came about. And then changing lives was to do with, that people with a brain injury, actually, it can be a long process of recovery. And with the right support, then they can, make a better life for themselves. And so that's how the changing lives part came about. So that was how we started. We have another statement, which is kind of all over the office walls and things. And maybe this one should go on the website as well. So at the time I wrote it, we were very little, and we were probably about 30, 40 people. I think it was possibly a bit wordy. When others choose Goliath, we are David. We fight for our clients all day long. We are agile, flexible, and dedicated. No matter your size or ability, all we see is potential, yours and ours. We work smart, dream big, and produce excellence. we protect and care for our clients, our community, and each other. Join us. That came out of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses course.
Just hearing what you've said, much of it sounds like the process has been you, perhaps sparked by something, reflecting on kind of what you were trying to accomplish through the firm and what the firm itself was trying to accomplish. Have I missed out something where there were other people, or has it been mostly you sort of channeling the organization, if I could put it that way?
Probably channeling and streams and rivers is a really good way of putting it, actually, Belden. I've been there since the start because I was one of the two founders. Like if you're a stream that starts in the mountains, then I was right at the head of the stream that goes out to the river. However, there are a million different tributaries into that stream, and that is both experiences that we've had, courses that we've done, learning that we've undertaken, reading that we've read, and of course all the people that feed into the stream, and they've come along at different points, in the stream and fed into it, and that makes us a bigger river and hopefully going wherever it is we're going to get to.
Specifically, what led you to decide to set out, your why as a statement on your website?
I think particularly as you grow, it can be harder to maintain your identity because, when we set up, we were 4 people, and Gemma, who co-founded the business with me, and I had worked together for a couple of years in previous employment, and then we set up together, and we were very clear as to who we were. We're very similar people and similar sets of values and so on, and that was just 2 of us. And then, of course, you grow a little bit, 10 people and 12 people, and you just all kind of instinctively know who you are. But as you grow, that can't continue because as you're bringing in disparate groups of people, we all have different value sets and we all, think some things are more important than another. And so it's really important to begin to set that down. I think a really important piece of work that we did, which was led by Ian Burke, who's our head of people and culture, and some might say he chose to start it at a fairly foolish time because he did it just as we were going into COVID, which made it very hard to consult with the team, was to set out our values, which are courage, cooperation, integrity, excellence, and kindness. It was absolutely developed through consultation with the team and the firm that we were at the time, which was probably about 40 to 50 people during that process, I would say. We did lots and lots of workshops and so on, and really managed to drill it down to both those 5 words, but also underlying statements as well. And so I think things like setting out your values and who you are and where you're going and putting them on the wall and on the website, just anywhere that's visible, basically, just reminds people every day about those things because that's what then knits you all together. And it's been really interesting how important our values have become in all of our decision-making processes. You just keep on reflecting back to those every time you need to make a decision, and you allow them to guide you and say, what's the decision with the most integrity, or what's a kind way to implement this decision. Then it just begins to shape you all the time. And if you stick to those principles, then you don't tend to deviate away from it.
Can you think of an example where those values have shaped a specific decision? What was the decision? What were the choices you might have made? And what was the one you made because of the values?
That's an interesting question. I think for me, our most important value, the one that always really resonates the most with me, is kindness. And I think that comes into play a lot of the time. I think when you're thinking about team decisions, there's maybe 2 main sets of decisions that you make. You're making decisions about your people, and you're making decisions about your clients and how you treat your clients. And so when you're making decisions about your team, and it might be how you structure your team, how you treat your people who are going through difficult situations, actually, if you say to yourself, we need to make every decision with integrity and kindness, then when you're making difficult decisions, which sometimes you've got to do about people and how you treat them, if people are going to be off on long-term sick, for example, then if you use integrity and kindness as your guiding principles, because it's very easy just to say, well, they're off on long-term sick and they're entitled to SSP and, leave them with statutory sick pay and that's all they need. But the reality is that for people who are in a really difficult spot, facing life-changing situations, the last thing they need to be worrying about is how they're going to pay the mortgage as well. And so we've used that as a guiding principle a few times in our people decisions. And what that also means then is that I don't have to make every decision, because actually you've empowered people and you've explained to them how we make our decisions. And therefore that means that they know that when they're making similar decisions, if they follow those principles, then that will be supported at the highest level of management.
I may be mistaken, but the firm strikes me as being particularly women-friendly, sort of as an example, maybe a little bit of a stereotype, but maybe not, that you adopted remote working and flexible hours right from the start. 2014, well before COVID, not particularly a common practice then, I suspect, but it's obviously paid off.
Yeah.
When you were making that decision, what led to that?
It was utterly pragmatic. So I come from fairly large corporate firms in the past. And when Gemma Morland and I decided to set the firm up, I was a partner elsewhere, so I was on a 6-month notice period. So I was actually 7 months pregnant with my second child when I handed in my notice to set EMG up. And then EMG was born, if you like, on the 1st of February 2014. And so at that point in time, I had 2 children under the age of 2. I had a 4-month-old and a 23-month-old. So there was really utter pragmatism. And also because we knew that Gemma was going to be facing all the same kinds of situations as I was, we absolutely had to be, pragmatic. So that's why we were paperless from the start. People had laptops rather than desk-based computers, all that stuff that feels really obvious now, but probably wasn't then, and why we had, complete flexibility about working from home as well. Because I just knew that I was going to have to work at all sorts of weird hours of the day and night around small people commitments. But you are absolutely right that has stood us in massively good stead. And I look at law firms and, they take on trainees, and often there are more women coming into the legal community than men. And they train up women so well. They train you how to time record. You're kind of an incredible lawyer at the end of it. And then unsurprisingly, somewhere between 5 and 10 years post-qualification, those same women want to start a family. And you've put all this time and effort and resource into them. And then you say, oh, well, actually, we're just not going to be flexible. And you drive those women away. So our most key hires, particularly in the early days, came from women coming out of large corporate law firms in the Northeast and other areas who'd reached that key point in post-qualification. They'd had a family, or they were a step parent and looking after their stepchildren, and they wanted time for their families, and they wanted to be able to come to work as well. And they were just really kind of being actively dissuaded from that where they were. But that was never going to change. You're not going to choose not to have children. What you've got to find out is a way of keeping parents at work. And, I have a colleague who joined us because the firm that she was at told her that literally the phrase was, you can't be a partner and push a pram. I mean, that just blows my mind. And also the thing for us was that was absolutely ideal for this, because these women were coming to us with smallish children. So they probably wanted to work either 3 or 4 days a week. We were setting up, so we didn't actually have enough work for someone to want to work 5 days a week anyway. So it was totally ideal for us to bring in someone who wanted to work 3 days a week, because that was about all we could afford to pay them, because we didn't have enough work for them anyway. And then, of course, as time has gone on and their practice area is built, so their children have grown and they want to go back to work full time. And therefore, we're able to offer them that because, there's now enough work for them. And what just feels really logical to me seems like, I don't know, it just seems like the penny hasn't dropped elsewhere. I would say we're probably about 60 to 70% women still, and a lot of them are working mums, certainly lots of working parents. What actually worries me, maybe somebody will give us feedback when they listen to this podcast, is that because our website showcases all of our people, there's no, we are the top dog and we've got our pictures on the website, everybody is on the website. And we do get way more applicants from women than men. And I almost begin to wonder whether we put men off. I worry now, do they look at our website and go, am I going to get anywhere as a man or whatever? So we have 11 directors. We have one very brave man, Richard, who's surrounded by 10 female directors. Richard loves that, but I'm not sure that every man would. And so
that's a really interesting dynamic there, Emma, isn't it?
It is, because equally, the applicants that we get for trainees, it's much more female focused. But, like everywhere, I believe in balance in terms of the age range that you employ and balance of the sexes. I think that workplaces are healthy when you have a balance of people. And so actually, we're almost at the point where we really want to actively encourage men to come and join us, because it will help us maintain that balance, which is really vital to the health of the workforce.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Mm.
One of the things that's certainly notable about this 10th anniversary year is your certification as a B Corp. Just interested to hear, why you decided to go for that. It's clearly, it's not a walk in the park, as I'm sure you know. It's a rather demanding process.
Yeah, no, it's a commitment.
Yeah. So what led you to go down that road? Why for you was that important? And so far, what's the sort of pluses and minuses of all of that?
So again, I will give the second shout out, I guess, to the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses course, because when I did one of their residentials, one of their speakers was a guy from B Corp. I might have heard of B Corp before then, but I hadn't really paid it any close attention. But so I listened really carefully to what he's got to say. And I found it really interesting because the environmental focus is really important. And a lot of firms, kind of place emphasis on their environmental strategy. And that's right. But what I really liked about B Corp was that it intends to keep all sorts of things in balance. It is every single stakeholder. I think a lot of people still talk about B Corp and say, oh, well, that's your green credentials, isn't it? And it is a bit of your green credentials, but it's actually so much more than that. And that's what I think is really important, because you have to look at, your suppliers and how you're treating them, and making sure that you're liaising with suppliers that subscribe to your values, but also, giving back into your community, how you treat your team, how you pay your team. Yes, you've got environmental credentials as well, because I think once you start saying any one thing has an overriding importance and you lose balance, you can very quickly tip the scales in any business, so that actually, you spend so much money on being green that you can't afford to pay your people well, or whatever it is. And that can't work for any business. So that's what I liked about B Corp. I desperately wanted to be the first law firm in the Northeast to become a B Corp, but we didn't quite manage that. So I have to shout out to Muckle, who got there before us. And they were really quick to reach out on the day that we announced that we were B Corp. And that is the great thing with B Corp. It seeks to create a really inclusive community. And that's important as well. Yes, it was quite an arduous process. We absolutely scraped in by the skin of our teeth, in terms of you have to get 80 points in order to be certified. It was pretty hard to get there. The great thing with B Corp is that it pushes you to improve. So you've got to seek to improve your score every time you go for a reassessment. What I really like about it is that it puts you in a position where you've got to think about all of those different things that actually all contribute towards running a successful business, and doing that, ethically and in a socially focused way. And I think that's always who we were, but B Corp allows us to put a stamp on that is recognizable for people. In terms of kind of taking on trainees and the next generation, they really pay close attention to B Corp, and they know what that is. I phoned up my parents. I was dead excited when we got B Corp. And I was like, oh, we've been B Corp certified. And my parents, who were in their 70s and 80s, said, oh, what's B Corp? They'd never heard of it. But the generation who's in their teens and 20s and 30s absolutely have. And it's meaningful. And therefore, it also helps you become an employer of choice. So there's lots of great things that go towards it. But yes, I think it fits really well with who we are and what we do.
I can absolutely hear your enthusiasm for it.
Yes.
You've talked about balance, and one of the areas that I think that sometimes is difficult, and you sort of touched on it, is in the area of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That if you try and do everything, sometimes you end up doing nothing. Mm-hmm. And so interested to hear, obviously you've been very successful, grown 4 people to 180, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. How would you sum up the strategy that steered the firm's growth? And if it's changed over that time, how did it change?
Well, there's the inside the firm strapline, mm-hmm. which is global domination, which is tongue-in-cheek. So when we set the firm up, and Gemma, who, as I've already said, co-founded the firm with me, would disagree and say that I'm lying, but I don't believe I am. We did not aim to become big. Our aim was not around growth. We wanted to create a business that would allow us to be working mothers, to look after clients well, and run a business according to our values. And we didn't really have any huge thoughts around growth. However, that has obviously changed as time's gone on. And definitely, the global domination words have been uttered around the office. obviously growth often means increasing your turnover. But to me, the business growing allows us to do 3 key things, which is to employ more people. And that is important because we're trying to create great jobs with well-paid, happy people. Then we can hopefully offer those opportunities to more people. And I think that has to be a good thing. To keep more clients happy, because I believe that all clients deserve a great legal service. And so if we can offer that to more people by growing, then that's got to be a good thing. And I've started to talk about it since our 10th birthday, and I've started to try and vocalize it, although I'm still slightly nervous about doing that, which is to raise a community foundation fund of £1 million. So we commit to giving 5% of our profits to charity, and we have our own charitable fund with what was the County Durham Community Foundation, which is now called Point North. And that makes grassroots grants back into local community bodies and to enable them to make, small but noticeable differences in their local communities. And I really passionately believe in that. And since we turned 10, we turned our fund last year into an endowment fund rather than a grant giving fund. So obviously that means that it should grow over time. My desire is that fund, before I retire, which will be hard work, becomes a fund of £1 million. It can make a good level of grants every year and be self-sustaining. So no matter what happens in the future, we will have created a lasting legacy. And as I age, I'm 49 now, that idea of creating a lasting legacy is one that's really important to me.
Interesting. So you've got this world domination phrase, and I can kind of hear the slightly tongue-in-cheekness.
Yeah.
And you've also talked about this sort of David and Goliath kind of concept.
They don't resonate very well together, do they?
It's funny, certainly for a long time, the two could be in creative tension. Let's put it that way. I could see that for a good long time.
I think we can become a Goliath with a David mentality, though. I think you can always maintain your David mentality, which is to challenge and to push boundaries and challenge yourself to be better. Steve Jobs would actively seek out challenge and constructive criticism and, say, don't just tell me this is the right thing to do, pull it apart. Like, let's get the best solution that we can, not have you just tell me that my solution is the right way. And that's not something that sat very easily with me, I think, for a long time, because of course we want to be right. And my husband would tell you that I want to be right all the time. And of course I am at home.
I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that.
That is the right thing to do, because what we should all be striving for is the best outcome, not necessarily the outcome that I have thought of. I think that is a bit of a David mentality, isn't it, really, to challenge and challenge yourself to think and ask colleagues to tell you when they disagree. And as long as they can also try and help you come up with the right solution, then that is a good thing. It's not something that I've always necessarily accepted well, and I'm still working on that, but it is the right thing to do.
Yeah. If you think back over the last 10 years, is there anything you'd do differently?
No, I don't think so. And that's not because we've created perfection, but because things are a process, aren't they? And so we couldn't be the firm that we are now without having gone through all the iterations of the business that we've been in the past. I'm not one for regrets, but I know that I could have communicated better in the past with people, but I don't beat myself up about that. I just try and do that better in the future, really. I'm someone who really embraces change, and I've had to learn that actually there are more people who don't embrace change than those who do, and that you have to sometimes take a pause, take some time, and make sure that everybody's all on the same page as to where you are before you go on and you take the next step. And this year, we've tried to have a year of consolidation and not go for much growth before we perhaps push again for more growth in the future. Some of my colleagues might argue as to whether we've achieved that terribly well, because we have still grown this year, but we haven't grown as much as we normally do.
Yeah, you've grown in spite of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's been quite considered, the growth that we've undertaken this year.
What advice might you give to other CEOs as they think about purpose and strategy?
personally, I think that giving back is really, really important, because actually as humans, largely we enjoy being part of a community and giving back into whatever community it is, that if you can build that in to your business in a way that's authentic, the key is not just to be doing it to tick a box, but to do something that you believe in as part of your overall business agenda, and you decide what it is that you believe in, then you begin to attract like-minded colleagues and like-minded clients, and you actually build a really resilient business because you've built your tribe around you. I do think that once you've just said, we're here to turn over money and we're here to make a profit and there's nothing else to it, if that becomes your guiding principle in all of your decision making, I think that leaves a work community that's poorer for everybody involved in it.
Great observation.
Thank you.
Anything we haven't touched on that you'd like listeners to know?
I think one of the great ways of challenging ourselves is by reading. I don't do enough of it, but I subscribe to Harvard Business Review. I've never read the magazine yet and not taken away some things that I think that triggers some thoughts as to how we could do stuff better, and the same with any kind of business books that you can get your hands on. Keep on reading and try and set aside some time for that, because it is in those times of thinking that you come up with your creative strategies and realize where you need to go and so on. And actually, the one thing that we've done this year that's been really transformational, and it was my colleague Emma Rickaby who came up with this, who's head of our quality risk and compliance. And Emma comes from a very process-driven background, really different to me. She worked at Transport for London, which is all about logistics and processes, effectively trying to prevent deaths on the railways. But you build that into your quality control processes in a law firm, and you get some great outcomes. In previous years, we've had half a day session with each of the heads of the different departments, setting aside that time to really think and plan strategy for the future. And then as a management team, we would try and draw all of that together and work out what we were going to do. And we'd struggle to find a way of representing that. And last year, Emma came to our annual planning meeting with a balanced scorecard. And it's just the best tool for visually representing what you want to do, but also to take the emphasis off being entirely around money and turnover and profit. As you will already know, Belden, a balanced scorecard generally has 4 quadrants. You have finances at the top and you set out your objectives in relation to them. So you've got your financial objectives, but the only way you get your financial objectives is if you've got your clients being willing to pay the bills. So then your next objective down is around your clients and how you keep them happy and what your objectives must be in order to do that. Next one down is about your people, because without great people, you're not going to keep your clients happy and they're not going to pay your bills. So you're not going to get your financial objectives. So you set your people objectives. And then underneath that, you don't get happy people unless you've got the right business processes in place. And so you set your objectives around that. And so you build this really lovely pyramid by following everything through. And you don't just say, well, we want to turn over £10 million. How are we going to get there? But all of a sudden, you have a flow of how you are going to achieve that objective or that profit level or whatever it might be. It's been really great as a guide to shape what we're doing. We've got a 10-year, a 3-year, and a 1-year balanced scorecard. So it's been really helpful for us in doing that. But also, it's a lovely visual tool. So when we have our quarterly firm meetings, we can put the balanced scorecard up on screen and disseminate it. And people can get a really nice snapshot of how we're doing. I'm now a massive advocate for the balanced scorecard. Next year, we're going to be using it departmentally and for individuals as well. And then really everything should begin to kind of build in a pyramid fashion, all in the same direction. And I think that will be really important for us.
What a fantastic thing to end on.
Thank you.
Because you've really very pragmatically laid out an answer to one of the questions that I'm always interested in, which is the how. How every year we do this, we've got this tool, we're increasingly sort of bringing it more granularly into the organization. I think that's really fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I might want to touch back in a year or two and see if you've managed to grow accidentally, or maybe next year you're going to do something different.
It'll all be by design next year. Global domination awaits, Belden.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.